welcome back to our study of the Exodus, where we are continuing to go through the actual book of Exodus. Tonight we're going to be in Exodus chapter 2, and last week we had finished the rest of chapter 1 of Exodus, discussing the controversy of the lie that the Hebrew midwives gave Pharaoh in order to save the male children who were born to the children of Israel. Of course, it was sadly for naught, because when all the children ended up being males, the Pharaoh then went from telling the midwives that when the babies are born, kill the males, spare the females. He instead sent his army out into the Hebrew villages in Egypt and took all the males and threw them into the Nile River, killing them. The pharaohs of the... Oh, somebody comes in. Big spot. The pharaohs of the 18th dynasty definitely became the oppression and affliction that God warned Abraham way back in Genesis. And today we are going to continue that tale of both biblical and historical proportion. Dad, give me just 1 second. I'm going to grab you a Bible, guys. Give me 1 second. Exodus chapter 2 tonight. And I'm going to begin here in Exodus chapter 2. I'm going to read verses 1 and 2. And a man of the house of Levi went and took a wife of the daughters of Levi. So the woman conceived and bore a son, and when she saw that he was a beautiful child, she hid him away for 3 months. So, story is always time. A man meets a woman, boy meets a girl. 2 Jews from the clan of Levi got married and had a child. Of course, this is still during the time. They're still under that rule of Pharaoh, of course. And at the moment, there is still a law of death over the male children at this time. So the Levi mother hid her child for 3 months because obviously he was small enough to hide away. Emma, will you read verses 3 and 4?
And when she could not longer hide him, she took for him an ark of bulrushes, and daubed it with slime and with pitch, and put the child therein, and she laid it in the flags by the river's brink. And his sister stood afar off to wit what would be done to him.
Children grow up. They get fussy. She was no longer able to successfully hide him away. This reminds me a lot of how the Jewish population had to hide during the events of the Holocaust in order to avoid arrest by the German soldiers. And when we read this kind of story in the Bible, we kind of glance over the details, but we have to remember that for the Hebrews at this time, this was a lot like what the population of the Jews suffered through during World War II and all the horrific things that happened then. This was not a nice, kind dictatorship. This was very, very brutal to their people. So what was this Levi mother to do? She made an ark or a basket of bulrushes. If you don't know what a bulrush is, that's what we southern people call the cattails that are near swamps or rivers. And then she sealed it with pitch, probably similar to what Noah used on his boat when we talked about that. And it's funny, I want to mention here that every time a ark is mentioned in the Bible, it carries with it salvation. The Ark of Noah carried the salvation that would be a new beginning for humanity after the flood. With the ark that has little baby Moses in it, spoiler, that's who the baby is, it carries salvation for the Hebrews from slavery. And the ark that would be constructed later, the Ark of the Covenant, carried the mercy seat on it that the sacrificed lamb lamb's blood would be put on each year as a symbolic gesture of salvation from sin for the nation of Israel. What we also see here is his sister. This is Miriam. This is little kid Miriam, stood from afar to watch the baby float down the river. And again, this is probably the Nile. Brad, will you read verses 5 through 7?
And the daughter of Pharaoh came down to wash herself at the river, and her maids walked along by the river's side. And then she saw the ark among the flags, and she sent her maid to fetch it. And when she had opened it, she saw the child, and behold, the babe wept. And she had compassion on him, and said, "This is one of the Hebrews' children."
And also verse 7.
Right. Then said his sister to Pharaoh's daughter, "Shall I go and call to thee a nurse for the Hebrew woman, that she may nurse the child for thee?"
And Sam, will you read 8 through 10?
And Pharaoh's daughter said to her, "Go." And the maid went and called the child's mother. And the Pharaoh's daughter said unto her, "Take this child away, and nurse it for me, and I will give thee thy wages." And the woman took the child and nursed it. And the child grew, and she brought him unto Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son. And she called his name Moses, and she said, "Because I drew him out of the water."
So even though this little baby is put in this ark and sent floating down the Nile, we see that God's providential will shines just like it did with Joseph. With Joseph, he was sold into slavery to Egypt to become the savior of his people by being promoted as the vizier of Egypt. But with Moses, little baby Moses, being ushered into the enemy's arms in this tiny ark, finds his way to the daughter of Pharaoh. So this is where one of those instances, like we did the first week, where we have to talk about what Pharaoh are we talking about, what princess are we talking about, what family are we talking about. So we got to talk about this again. Who is this? So understand that Moses was born around 1525 BC. All right, 1525 BC. That puts him in a very unique time for the family of the Pharaohs. First, the daughter of Pharaoh in question here is almost undoubtedly, and I'm going to butcher all these names, but that's okay. Hatshepsut is my best pronunciation. She is the daughter of Thutmose I. Her father was probably the one from the last chapter that ordered the mass deaths of the Hebrew children at the end of the chapter to be thrown into the Nile River. When Thutmose I died, his son, unironically, Thutmose II, took over and married his half-sister Hatshepsut, which would make her the queen regent at this time, which does not mess with the biblical accuracy of calling her Pharaoh's daughter, because yes, she is the queen regent at this time, but she's still the daughter of Pharaoh, benzing that her father was Thutmose I, and Thutmose II's father is also Thutmose I. So she married her half-brother. That was very common in Egyptian royalty like this. Meaning that, of course, the people who would have raised Moses in Egypt over the next 40 years was Thutmose II, who reigned as Pharaoh, and his queen regent Hatshepsut. So Hatshepsut sees this child, recognizes him as a Hebrew child, but again, God is still with the Hebrew people, and this Egyptian queen has compassion on the child and took him in as her own. Now, why did she do this? It only had to be by the grace of God, because the Hebrews were considered the property of Egyptians by then. So there would have been no other reason for her to take pity on this child. In fact, it would have been her human right to execute the child under her husband's order. She then called for a woman of the Hebrews, which again she could do human-wise, because again at this time the Egyptian owned the Jews through slavery. So she calls one to come and aid her. So Moses' sister, remember, Miriam has been watching from afar off, watching her little brother float down the Nile River, and sees the queen of Egypt take Moses out of the ark and rushes in to say, hey, I know someone who can take care of that Hebrew child and nurse him for you. So Miriam goes back to her mother, Moses' mother, and tells her exactly what has happened and brings her before the queen of Egypt so that she could raise and nurse the child for the queen of Egypt. Through God's blessing, Moses was, at least for a little while, able to be raised by his own mother, who, ironically, was paid for the services of raising her own child. But sadly, when Moses was old enough, probably according to Hebrew customs that we studied in Genesis, remember they nursed their children anywhere from birth to 3 to 5 years old. So when his time of nursing was done, he was brought before the queen of Egypt to be her son in the court of Pharaoh, and Hatshepsut named the child Moses because he was drew out of water. Now, I did study this name a little bit. It is suggested that the name was a pun since he was literally found and taken out of water. It is also suggested that technically Moses is an original Egyptian name. So this is not like with Joseph, who was named Joseph and was renamed to whatever that big long name was. Don't ask me to say it, can't say it. When Pharaoh promoted him to vizier of Egypt, he was known as something else. I think it started with a Z. Moses, an Egyptian original name, probably was a play on the Hebrew verb for drawn out of water, which is Masha'ah, I think. Best pronunciation, Masha'ah. And Hebrews would always name their children that meant something. There is not one name we have studied so far in Genesis that didn't have some type of meaning behind it. So his birth mother probably suggested the Egyptian version of this word, which would have been Moses. As the adopted son of Pharaoh and his queen, Moses would have learned reading, writing, and arithmetic, and multiple languages, which is no-brainer on why he was able to author the first 5 books of the Bible. Also, since Hatshepsut knew that Moses was a Hebrew, it was not probably some big, huge secret like suggested in the movies. And since his birth mother was his nurse, his wet nurse, she likely herself raised him till about the age of 5, telling him about his origin. So though Moses was mainly raised as an Egyptian, like Joseph, never forgot about his ancestry, which plays on what we're going to talk about next. Dad, will you read verse 11?
And it came to pass in those days when Moses was grown, that he went out unto his brethren, and looked on their burdens, and he spied an Egyptian smiting a Hebrew one of his brethren.
In verse 12 it says, so he looked this way and that way, and when he saw no one, he killed the Egyptian and hid him in the sand. So Moses grew up in the court of Pharaoh with a top-notch education and the best society life had to offer for an Egyptian royal. But he never forgot about the possible stories that his mother told him when he was a young boy, about the one true God, about his Hebrew ancestry, about Jacob and Esau, and about Abraham, and all the stories that had come to their people since this time, about Noah and the flood. So one day, he goes out and about, and understand, Well, I'll mention this in a second, never mind. So one day he goes out and about, he sees the suffering of his people, the chosen people of God, and what does he do? He kills an Egyptian workmaster over a group of Hebrews that he sees this Egyptian workmaster beating one of them. Now, if anyone thinks that Moses was like a teen or a very young adult, you'd be wrong. Okay, I know it's kind of sad. I watched The Prince of Egypt after we started this study, and as good as a movie as that is, it is terrible how many biblical inaccuracies are in that movie. But, you know, Hollywood doesn't always get it right. Yeah, he's not. According to Acts chapter 7, verse 23 through 25, it says, "Now when he was 40 years old, it came into his heart to visit his brethren." So Moses is 40 when this happens. He has been living in Egypt for 40 years. So it probably wasn't normal for a prince of Egypt to go down to the slave quarters or the work quarters like this unless you had a specific job. So it may have been that he had that. However, it says that according to Acts, it was pressed upon Moses' heart to witness the suffering of his people. So this was probably God calling him to this area, and probably something he had not done before. Sure, he had probably interacted with Hebrews, since they were the slaves of Egypt, but it probably was not something that he just casually done all the time. For he supposed that his brethren would have understood, as the rest of the verse says, for he supposed that his brethren would have understood that God would deliver them from the hands, but they did not understand. We're going to get a lot into this in a second, but understand that Moses is 40 at the time, not a teenager. Let's continue on. Emma, will you read verse 13?
And when he went out the second day, behold, 2 men of the Hebrews strove together, and he said to him that did the wrong, wherefore smitest thou thy fellow?
Brad, will you read 14 and 15?
And he said, "Who made thee a prince and a judge over us? Intend thou to kill me, as thou killest the Egyptian?" And Moses feared and said, "Surely this thing is known." Now when Pharaoh heard this thing, he sought to slay Moses. But Moses fled from the face of Pharaoh and dwelt in the land of Midian. And he sat down by a well.
So we get what happens the very next day. Moses goes back to the work quarry that he went the previous day to check on the Hebrews, probably the ones that he had seen the day before. Well, what does he see? He sees 2 Hebrews fighting. He breaks it up, and they're not happy about seeing Moses, snapping back with, "Who made you a prince or a judge over us?" Which is kind of weird because, again, he's technically a prince of Egypt at this time, so he is a prince over them. But they also snap back with, "Do you intend to kill me as you killed the Egyptian?" This also may nod at the fact that when he went down there to the work quarry, he probably was not supposed to be down there and probably did not have any type of princely garments, princely garments on, so he was probably in disguise. So this all plays into what is written in Acts. That is in Acts chapter 7, verses 23 through 25. When it says that Moses was pressed on his heart to do something about his people's oppression. He didn't attack this Egyptian just out of a crime of passion. This wasn't technically an accident. The death may have been. But Moses, as theology puts it, went down there with the idea of he was about to deliver them out of slavery. So he went down there with the intent, this 40-year-old man, to go and get the Hebrews out of slavery. Again, we've got a lot to unpack here. Apparently Moses, was taught by his mother about, the Hebrew scriptures and about the stories and all these things. Because, again, he had this pressed upon his heart to accomplish what God wanted, which was to get the Hebrews free and to liberate them. However, we see the start of a reoccurring theme with Moses and the children of Israel. Despite Moses killing the Egyptian workmaster for beating the Hebrews that he had witnessed, the Hebrews gave Moses pushback. And again, we're going to see similar occurrences of this throughout our study of when they're in the wilderness for 40 years, of the children of Israel sliding back against Moses or against God, or complaining against Moses or God. And also, we will see when the children of Israel aren't ready for something, the Lord will postpone his blessings. He never gets rid of them. Because again, these are his promised people, and he promised them certain things. Just simply, when they complain or when they aren't ready for something, God will push back that blessing until they are ready for it. And in this case, they are not ready for Moses to lead them, as they give him attitude for killing an Egyptian slave owner. So because Moses flees from Egypt, he flees out of fear because he thinks that the killing has been discovered, and it was, and Pharaoh wants to kill him for it. Because again, that would have been a capital crime at that time. He didn't want to suffer his consequences, so he leaves. Now, that out of the way, before we continue, like last week's discussion, when we talked about with the lie of the midwives and discussing whether lying is ever passable or good, now we have to discuss about the killing of this Egyptian. Did Moses sin? Well, first we have to add again that this is before the law was given at Mount Sinai. And again, Romans teaches that before the law was given at Sinai, sin was not imputed on mankind directly, unless it was a specific situation, because essentially at this time there was ignorance in the law. God had not given the law yet. The Lord gave at Mount Sinai that thou shalt not lie, which again, after that point, that took care of the actions of the midwives, because from that point on, lying was against God's law. So then also, you shall not kill was also given, which has been argued throughout history. But this is before all of the law was given. So did he sin? Well, if you take in that this killing is a sin, then yes, but it wasn't passed on to him. No, not really. However, there's a little bit more to say about this. In regard to the killing, again, it's one of the Ten Commandments. Wasn't given yet. And there's an argument to be made for both sides, but I'm going to give y'all the original wording of it. So when God said, thou shalt not kill, again, I believe the King James Bible says kill, and I think others say murder. I'm going to give y'all some words here and try not to butcher them. So there are 4 words, two Hebrew and 2 Greek words. The first Hebrew word, give me just a second here. All right. 2 Hebrew words are given when it comes to killing. You have ratzka and mut, and the 2 Greek words are phoino and apkoteno, is my best rendering of that, for murder and killing. Ratza and phoino mean to put to death. While mut and apatino mean murder. The latter one, the murdering one, the mut and apotino, this is what's listed in the Ten Commandments as being prohibited. It goes back to Genesis when God established the new covenant with Noah and tells him that the shedding of human life is prohibited. This was said because of what had happened with the story of Cain and Abel. Unnecessarily taking of human life. But, fun fact, with this, to put to death, Ratzka, this Hebrew word also goes along with accidental death or wartime death. So there is a difference biblically between necessary and justifiable death and unnecessary and shedding of innocent blood. So understand that these two words are different than these two words. So what is used in the Ten Commandments is talking about these two words, which means unnecessary taking of human life. If the law meant no killing whatsoever, then technically God would have been violating his own laws when he takes life or when he sends the children of Israel into war against another nation, as we'll cover some of those stories when we go into the 40-year Exodus. But that's not what it means. This is a very hard concept for some to grasp, and if there are any questions, I'll be glad to answer it.
Sorry.
No, you did. Okay, go ahead.
I'll be right back.
But, again, this is a hard concept, but for others, such as soldiers who are also believers, it is a major relief to know that what they've had to do in wartime for their country or in the acts of war, they're not, somehow eternally damned for doing their duty to their country. Because, again, there is a difference between doing the justifiable killing and taking of innocent life. Jesus emphasized, let me back up a little bit. Also, sinful killing has always been tied with hatred emotions. 1 John 3:15 states that everyone who hates his brother is a murderer, and you know that no murderer has eternal life abiding with him. Jesus emphasizes this idea in Matthew chapter 5 when Jesus says, "Have you not heard that you shall not murder? But I tell you, anyone who is angry with his brother without cause is also in danger of judgment," equating the two together. And if we remember our story with Cain and Abel, remember Cain did not justifiably kill his brother Abel. He had hate in his heart and jealousy toward his brother, and that's why he murdered him. So, the question comes up, did Moses do anything wrong? He did take a life, but it was in defense of someone else who was being beat. Also, this Egyptian was technically an enemy of the Lord's people, making him an enemy of God. Again, I'm not giving anyone a reason to go kill anyone, so please don't ever hurt anybody like that. I've talked with many friends who have been in combat, and they've talked with me about the things that happen during wartime and how it changes you, how some of the things that they went through still haunt them to this day after years of being out of the military. But so that way we are correctly looking at scriptures, understand that there is a theological difference between necessary and unnecessary taking of life. So what Moses did here, again, I leave it up to your interpretation, but from what we can see here, what Moses was doing was a part of God's will. Any questions about that? Any questions I need to answer online? Okay. All right. Well, next week we're going to stop here because it goes into Moses' exile for 40 years in Midian, and next week we are going to cover that. In the meantime, I hope you guys have a wonderful week. If you have any questions about this or about maybe these words here, you can always reach out to us in the comments section down below this video or at our email, guardiansofchristministries@gmail.com. And of course, this video will also be going on YouTube, so you YouTube people, be sure to like and subscribe to our YouTube page for more content like this. God bless and have a wonderful week.